Welcome once again to the Influencers Podcast. We are here to see the influence of your life grow, that you have been equipped by your Father to be a victor.
Hello, and welcome to the Influencers Podcast. I am Chrissy Cochran, and I'm filling in for Scott Young and Dave Donaldson today, who are out on assignment. But I'm not sad about that at all, because I have a very special guest here with us today that I'm thrilled about. But before I get to introduce our guest, just a couple of words. The infallible living word of God, as penned in the historic King James Version, has had a powerful influence on language and literature since 1611, under the reign of King James I. Now, the King James Bible is entwined with poetic cadence and vivid imagery, and is the standard by which all translations of most printed books of all time are measured. So, with that being said, joining us today is Tim Gagnon, known as the Fire Painter, who is an award-winning artist, author, speaker, and instructor, best known for creating works of art live on stage while his paintbrushes, get this, paintbrushes are on fire, literally on fire. I'm amazed. So for nearly 2 decades, he has performed and exhibited in galleries and churches and schools and conferences and stadiums across the country. So I'm so thrilled to have Tim with us today, and we're going to hear more about his work and how God has gifted him with this great talent and how he has used this talent to glorify the Lord and influence others for Jesus. Also, in 2019, I don't want to forget to mention that Tim founded the nonprofit Gagnon Atelier to assist churches and civic organizations to reach their communities through visual arts. So that's something that we're going to talk about as well. And here we go. Tim, thank you for joining us and being with me today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. This is pretty exciting. You buttered me all up. I feel like a piece of toast over here.
Well, you are amazing, and I'm always thrilled. As I had told you before we came on, like, I'm always jealous of people that are just so gifted and talented at the arts, and I'm always so jealous. I'm going to jump into our first question. I know a lot of listeners are probably wondering, did I hear her right? Fire on paintbrushes, and even my own family said, "What? A fire painter? What is that?" So tell us, how do you paint while your paintbrushes are on fire? And how does it work? Tell me as much as you can, Tim.
Sure. Well, I've got the brush right here. This is the brush that I use. It's really long. It's a beautiful 24-inch brush from Rosemary and Company Brushes out of England. They make handmade brushes. They make the best brushes in the world, I can tell you that. But this one is extra special because what I do is I basically, while I'm painting, there's paint on this end and I'm painting away, doing what's called speed painting. Nowadays in the Christian world, they call it prophetic art. That's the new catchphrase for it. But, you know, back in the day, because I've been doing this a long time, we call it speed painting. We'd go on stage and we'd paint a picture really, really fast to music. And to separate myself from the pack, I light my paintbrushes on fire. So while I'm painting, this brush is also on fire, and I'm swinging that fire around my head, and then I breathe fire and all of that during the performance. And it just makes it really, really exciting and fun to watch.
Okay, but as if watching you paint something and create something isn't already really cool and fun to watch. So you had it just to add that fire element. And did you say breathing fire? Did you say breathing fire?
Yeah, I breathe fire also. That's a new part of the act, if you want to call it that. And you know, it's funny. People always, it depends where I'm doing it, but people think that the paint, like the fire does something, like it dries the paint faster, or it makes because I usually, when I'm fire painting, I have like a metallic paint on my brushes to give it like the last pizzazz. It's like the piece de la resistance on the painting, you know? And, they think it does something special to the paint. But then when I do it in churches, people come up and they're like, they get these super spiritual things behind the fire. Like, oh, does it represent the fires of Pentecost coming down and all that? And I'm like, no, it's just cool. Or hot. It's hot. It's really exciting. And that's the only reason. It's just really fun. It's exciting to watch and people go crazy for it. So there you go.
Hey, well, I love that. I can't wait to watch and see that in person because I can imagine, though, it's just so much more. I mean, being able to watch an artist and have their just pieces unfold right in front of you. I've seen that before and I'm mesmerized. I mean, by like a non-painter, I am like, this, how are they able to do that? And just to see it come to life. And then you've just added this element of like entertainment with it is so captivating. So I think that's so cool. But what I want to ask you next is just about your project with the Illuminated Messiah. So I did a little research and took a look at what that is all about. And you have 66 portraits that each depict each chapter of the Bible, right? And then come
Yes,
together
each book of the
to have
Bible
this one big
is
picture of the
illuminated.
Messiah on
So
the
it's
cross.
basically
Can you tell
it's
me
66
about that
messianic
project? I love it.
portraits, Jesus from every book of the Bible.
So a little bit about, though, just art illuminations, which is a new concept for me and maybe even several listeners that we have. But is this something new to just the biblical artwork or church history?
No.
Just something that you just created?
No, this is actually an illumination is a very ancient art form. And it dates back, it had its heyday during the 8th and 9th century, during the Middle Ages, under King Charlemagne. And King Charlemagne, for those that don't know who he is, he's like the King Solomon of Christendom. And so he was the greatest king during the Middle Ages that really pushed the Christian faith. And he was an extremely devout man, and he wanted to spread Christianity throughout Europe. And he was anointed emperor because he kind of was almost reforming the Roman Empire. And he tried to launch the Renaissance, but it's like Europe wasn't ready for that. And so as part of his launch, he created this school called the Ancient School. And part of that was making illuminated manuscript Bibles. And what an illuminated manuscript Bible is it's the calligraphy, it's gold leaf, and it is narrative paintings. But that art form actually traces its origins way back, thousands of years back, in the Jewish tradition called Hidur Mitzvah. And that dates all the way back to the Babylonian captivity. When the Jews were captive in Babylon, the rabbis were looking at Exodus 15:2, and they were looking where it said, I will exalt God. But the word exalt was kind of like, it was different. It was weird. They were looking at it going, what is Moses trying to say when he put the word exalt in this way, in this passage? And after great debate and great study, the rabbis came up with this. I will exalt God by creating beautiful things. So the tradition of Hidur Mitzvah, you may have heard of a bar mitzvah. The Hidur Mitzvah means the beautification of the law, the beautification of the Torah, or if you want to put it in modern language, the beautification of the Word of God. And so making a beautiful Bible, making it as beautiful as you possibly can, is actually an act of worship. The visual arts become an act of worship to exalt God and His Word. And that's what I do.
Well, you do it really well. And I had no
Thank
idea
you.
that there was so much history there with it. Is that what really inspired you to do the Illuminated Messiah?
Well, it was a lot of things. I mean, obviously, I love the Word of God. And because I'm an artist, I'm a visual thinker. When I read the Word of God, I don't see words on a page. I see flashes of images and images and images. And so when you're an artist, one of the things that really kind of gets you is you'll see something in your head and you're like, I got to paint that. I got to draw that. I'm going to go nuts if I don't. And so I began to want to paint the scriptures. And that goes all the way back to when I was in the military. I had just given my heart to the Lord. And I met there were two gentlemen, my flight commander and a chaplain, Captain Mark Hayes and Chaplain Bruce Ewing. And these two gentlemen, I was an artist in the military. It was my job in the military. But they recognized that I had a calling with my art. And these two gentlemen, they taught me, they discipled me. They raised me up in the faith. They were my two fathers in the faith. And one of the things they taught me was God has a plan for your art. And they taught me that I can use my artistic skills for the kingdom. And they also taught me that you don't paint for God, you paint with God, collaborative effort. And so through that, it's always been my heart. It's always my heart to lift up the word of God, but also to express my faith through my art. They're two sides of the same coin. It's the way I communicate is through the visual arts. And so when I'm doing a Bible study, and my favorite thing to study in the Bible are those messianic prophecies in the Old Testament and their fulfillment in the New. So it was only a matter of time from geeking out for decades on those messianic passages that something like this was going to happen. And so after a couple of years of doing other things with my art, it came time, and I just felt the Lord going, it's time for you to do this. And so I spent 5 years in the studio. I stopped traveling. I stopped fire painting. I stopped all of that stuff. And I went into the studio right over there to that easel that I'm looking at that you can't see. And I started painting all of the paintings that are in this Bible, just me and Jesus all alone, just the two of us painting away and creating all the artwork in this Bible.
And you said that you're not painting for God, you're painting with God. I think that is super cool. My next question, though, is what really inspired you, or how did you decide which passages of the Bible to feature in the Illuminated Messiah?
That is a fabulous question. Because what a lot of people don't realize is there are hundreds of Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah, beginning in Genesis 3:15, right after the fall, right after Adam and Eve, they fall. God lines them up, Adam, Eve, and the devil, and he goes boom, boom, boom. And immediately when he's cursing the serpent, he gives the first promise of the Messiah, that descendant of Eve that would restore the relationship between God and man and destroy the works of the devil. And then from that point all the way through to the New Testament, there are hundreds and hundreds of passages. And in some books like Isaiah, oh my gosh, there's so many. In the book of Psalms, there are massive amounts of them. So the question then becomes is, in this particular book of the Bible, which one is the one? What is the best representation of the theme of the Messiah that, say, Isaiah is trying to get? And a lot of times what I would do, and Isaiah is a perfect example, it's like, okay, Isaiah is talking about the Messiah, and there's twice in Isaiah that his messianic prophecies are about a virgin giving birth and him being a son and this baby being born. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna paint a Madonna and child. What's great about that is that particular passage is fulfilled in Matthew. And so the Madonna and child are both in Isaiah and in the book of Matthew painted. And so they connect. That's that connection point. So I would look for messianic prophecies in the Old Testament that were powerful and really laid it out. What was the big theme of that author of that book? But also if there was any connection, a direct connection to the New Testament really mattered.
Well, do you feel like that was the hardest part or the most challenging part, is picking those passages? Or was there another part of it all that was more challenging?
Well, I had challenges both theologically and artistically that were in a way very different from each other. So on the theology side, finding out what that passage was, and then also getting a correct interpretation of that particular passage, because, ancient Hebrew is a very metaphorical, poetic language, which is also why I like the King James Version. But you have to figure that out. And so that was difficult. But the most difficult part artistically was the process. The process of creating an illumination with the gold leaf and the text and everything else. When I was doing this process, if anything went wrong in the process, it would tear the entire painting off of the panel. And I would have to completely start from scratch. And you want to talk about sweating and running around screaming, going, oh, the frustration of that. There were paintings that I painted 6, 10, 12 times, and it was just very frustrating. So that would be a problem. But the biggest issue that made it difficult was the fact that there's a hook. There's a little surprise in this. And that's that every single one of these 66 paintings join together, and they form in the art world what is called a polyptych image. And so what that is that's basically out of many one. Multiple smaller images joining together to make a big, giant new image. And in this case, all of these 66 8 by 10 panels joined together, and they form a 12.5-foot cross. And when you're looking at that, you no longer see the individual paintings. You see Jesus crucified on the cross. So to be able to paint Moses parting the Red Sea while at the same time hiding the fact that Jesus's toes are in that painting. Or this is a portrait of the Queen of Sheba, but she's Jesus's left kneecap. Or Jonah and the great fish, but that's actually Jesus's right forearm. How do you hide that in the original painting, but then it's revealed as his body on the cross in the final one? That was a logistic nightmare.
Well, you, I think, made it look really easy because for myself that does not have a visual arts brain, I see that come together and I go, how did he do that? That's beautiful. And I think, oh, these artists, they could just see it and whip it up. But
yeah,
you're saying that's probably the challenging. Okay.
That's why it took 5 years. Look, see this balding? 5 years. You know, that it's not just the fact that I have 5 kids that gave me the balding. This is my Sistine Chapel. This is my magnum opus. This wore me out, and I feel it. And this is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and prayer, and fasting, and believing, and faith, and frustration. And this was quite a journey for me. And it all comes from I wanted to figure out and contemplate the Messiah, our promised Messiah. What does that mean? What did that mean for them back then? What does that mean to the New Testament believers that were encountering Jesus? Because he was saying, I am the Messiah. And then how did they wrap their brain around that? And then what does that mean to us today? What is that going to mean to us for eternity? I'm trying to figure that out. And I'm having these devotional times creating this piece of artwork. And now the readers of this Bible, they can go through that journey with me. Because in addition to all of these paintings, we also have commentaries where I explain the theology behind every brushstroke is in here as well. So the reader can go along that journey with me and have this incredible Bible study. And hopefully it won't take them 5 years to do it.
Well, thanks for putting in those 5 years. And, putting in one for the team, because it is such a beautiful work of art. And I'm getting that Bible. I'm getting that Bible for sure. But it's just shifting gears a little bit. And you talked about it a little bit earlier, how you had 2 men, you were in the military, and you had 2 men that were your mentors. And now, kind of taking a step back and looking back to see how they shaped your walk, how important is mentorship to you in regarding someone's faith walk and developing them to walk in the giftings that God has given them?
Oh, it's massive. The Bible talks about older believers mentoring younger believers. As a man of faith, I take it. It's my responsibility to find those younger men in my congregation and come here. Let's get it. Let's develop a relationship. My friend Matt Tommy, he says relationships are the currency of the kingdom. That's mentoring. That's getting in there and discipling younger believers, and in all aspects of life. And Captain Hayes was what the man was. He was sharp. He was sharp. He was a super devout man of faith. And he was a Sunday school teacher at a local Baptist church. And what he would do is he'd call me up and he'd say, Herman Gagnon, come to the CO's office. I would go over there, and I think, my friends thought I was in trouble all the time because I would be going to his office all the time. But he would say, he would do this like on lunch or before work started. He'd say, hey, I'm doing a Bible study in my Sunday school class on David and Goliath. Could you paint me a picture of David and Goliath? And I would say, sure, no problem. And he'd say, hold on now. It's got to be biblically accurate. Oh, what does that mean? I've never heard that phrase before. Biblically accurate. Tingled my new Christian ears. And so he said, let's sit down. Let's have a Bible study about David and Goliath. And he'd take me on this great Bible study of David and Goliath. And then I would then be allowed to go paint the painting. And I'd bring it back and he'd be like, oh, this is great. Thank you so much. And then he'd go. And then the next week, hey, I'm doing a Bible study on Isaiah meeting the seraphim and all this. And I don't even know what a seraphim is. What is that? Oh, well, this is what it is. Da, 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 da. And we do another Bible study. Go paint it. Okay, I'd go paint it. And he did that all the time during our time of service together at Tyndall Air Force Base. before I knew it, without even realizing this man was doing it, he was teaching me to fall in love with the Word of God. And